It's a pilot program under the umbrella of the Black River Action Team, and we are looking at stormwater on the land and how we can help manage it by keeping our culverts and ditches clean, clear, and properly functioning. This is a partnership between BRAT and Dartmouth College, as well as Cavendish Connects and the Black River Valley Resources, which is our local long-term recovery group. The focus of this is to support town staff as they prioritize culverts and ditches that need work.
After the 2023 floods, where many of our roads were so badly damaged in Cavendish, the culverts were in rough shape. And we started in the fall, really trying to make people aware of not pitching in the ditch. But the way that flood and the recovery went, it was hard to launch a full-blown program. So definitely the seeds were sown in the fall of 2023 with the idea that in the springtime we would really hit a campaign of don't pitch in the ditch. Because if the ditches are open, if there's no trash in there, there's no debris, the water flows through and it's not going to undermine your road. For generations, people have taken their yard waste and dumped it into the ditch. They drive down the road, they throw out their cans, their leftover McDonald's, and it ends up in ditches. And ditches can't do their job. They clog up the culverts.
In a drainage ditch like this, it can really clog it up and make it back up and flood into people's homes, damage the neighborhood, damage the bridge. So we're clearing it out. We're going to give this water some room to roam, so we can get, not room to roam, but room to get to the river and do what it's got to do.
By our house, we have a big ditch that goes into a culvert, and it flooded 4 times. So we during just in 2023, we had to dig that out 4 times actually. And I've walked the whole ditch. I see where the other places are that are feeding into it. But as a homeowner, it's on my property, so we're responsible for it. The culvert that goes under the road is actually the state's culvert, but the ditch is my responsibility. And I don't think homeowners realize that if they have a ditch on their property, it's up to them to really take care of that. Number 1 was don't pitch in the ditch, which we really started pushing in the spring of 2024. We were fortunate enough to be working with Dartmouth, and the objective was to evaluate our culverts.
So working with town, regional, and state partners, the Dartmouth College students developed an app as the first step in their process, which they used to survey every culvert and ditch that they could find in Cavendish with guidance from the town manager. The goal here is to support the town staff as they prioritize which culverts and ditches need work. They might need maintenance, they might need replacement. The town staff can't be everywhere all at once, so if we have more boots on the ground, more eyes on the neighborhood, and on some of these back roads, it really helps the town have a chance to prioritize their work.
And so we've been working in Cavendish, Vermont, working on community-based resilience to flooding. And so since there's been a lot of increased flooding in recent years, especially last summers, there's been a lot of real issues with flooding and issues with infrastructure problems.
Yeah, so what we've been doing on the ground is sort of creating a way for the community to go around and survey a lot of their stormwater infrastructure. So ditches, so those are sort of like the dirt rows on the side of a road, versus culverts, which are sort of the pipes that go underneath the road, and then some storm drains if any of them are looking particularly janky. And so we go out into the community and we work with our community partners who are absolutely lovely.
Cavendish has over 700 culverts. We have a small town crew. People want to keep taxes low. But we still needed to look at the culverts, particularly roads that flooded. What were the shape of those culverts? And so we started working with the students. So the project was really driven by the students. They drove the bus on this. They showed there was so much more they could do. And very quickly, we were cleaning out culverts. We were cleaning out ditches. We had a whole crew that came in and did places where it had badly flooded, where trees had grown in, all kinds of stuff was in it, and we cleaned out the ditches. And so it just went from there.
We just can't, the town can't like look at it. You know, when you have boots on the ground like these guys did, that's invaluable. I mean, walking every single road is just, it's pretty impressive actually. It worked great. So, and it's something that we just don't have time to do on a regular basis. So it was great.
You know, the beta test was Cavendish, so to speak. But
It's now
there is an
being rolled out
element
to other
that
towns.
we can't rely on the town to get everything done. There just isn't the money for it. Unfortunately, if people want taxes that are affordable, we all have to pitch in and not pitch. A floodway is more, this is where, like, this is a floodplain. This area is where water is going to come in. It could come in here much more efficiently, spread out more, and protect. That becomes a restorative floodplain. A floodway means you're pretty much going to really get heavy impact.
You're in the floodway, you're in the way of the flood, but the whole area where the water can spread out, if it needs to, that's the floodplain. So the river and the floodway
about what
are
does it
in the
mean to
floodplain.
look at a forest, or to look at a piece of land, or to look at a place that's been flooded, paying attention to how debris moves, not just the siltation on the surface, but also how do the plant parts line up.
Very early on, Kara's Boak, Dr. Boak, she grew up in Weathersfield, Perkinsville area, so she knew the area. She's an anthropologist, and she is part of some groups that deal with disasters, and they actually came in and helped out in the shelter. So she saw firsthand what we were doing, and she told me then that she was going to be putting in for some grant funding. And I said, great. You know, I had 20,000 things I was doing, but it was something that I thought we should support and work with.
I was involved in mutual aid response right after the floods in 2023 in Cavendish and a little bit in Ludlow. And during that work, I was bringing supplies and helping support the efforts that were ongoing, both over at the Cavendish Baptist Church and through Kelly Stettner and the Black River Action Team. They were running a lot of volunteers out of their tent in Ludlow. And so I got to know those folks a little bit. And I got really interested in the ways that I saw that folks were running into problems with communications or knowledge around mapping or around how to get things from one place to another or who needs what. And so I started talking with Dr. Kelly about this, the possibility of doing some kind of research project on flood recovery in this area.
I'm a co-principal investigator with Dr. Kerspoke, who's leading the project, and I have been developing the Culvert Crawlers program and really working on the community mapping. And we said, well, what could we do as like a first step for our students to work with you all? And that was my class, Energy Justice. And Kelly said, well, do you know about culverts?
We came up with this idea that maybe it would be good to do some monitoring work around culverts, drains, and ditches. And from that, the Culvert Crawlers program was born.
And it's basically seeing like, what's the health of these culverts, drains, and ditches? Are they clogged? Is the headstone of a culvert falling down? How are they doing? And diagnosing that through sending it to an ArcGIS, like cloud database, and then exporting that information via an Excel. And it comes out saying that there are certain ones that need more repair, that are in more disrepair. And so that information gets shared with the local towns.
Yeah, so a lot of people don't know all the work that goes into culverts. Like, what do we even mean when we're saying like we're going out and we're surveying these culverts? Are we clearing them out? That kind of thing. So
and then we also wanted to make sure that people are aware of really the problem that's underneath their feet a lot of the time. Their culverts get blocked up on private property. That can lead to public culverts also getting backed up or ditches also getting clogged. So different flyers on like, hey, how do you actually maintain your ditch? Don't throw your trash in it.
Yeah, this is like I like how you can see how it used to be, like flowing. Like this is clearly sediment flow from what used to be
I don't.
a stream. But
And there's no header.
yeah,
It's like gone.
it's all just like
You know, we
mud,
found a
kind of.
spread, but we definitely found a significant
Okay,
number
that's
of
good to know.
culverts that needed repair and needed reconsideration about how they'll fix them in the future. One real kind of important data point. So we're doing 3 types of mapping: the culverts and 2 other types of community mapping around how people have been affected by flooding and what are their critical infrastructure. And one thing that we found in doing, you know, we've been mapping at the farmers markets, we've had some community mapping events, and we found that of all those points, 1/3 of them are in flooding impacts are in areas that are not in FEMA floodplains. So local folks know that the floodplain maps of FEMA aren't totally accurate, but we found a significant amount of data points that show that where we think aren't floodplains are really being affected as floodplains locally. And so that's a big finding. All types of developers are using FEMA floodplains to make decisions that are hopefully safe. But if those are out of date, that affects, you know, people might be building infrastructure in places that could be hit in the future. So we really need to update our maps and update our local understanding of these issues to make more informed decisions for development and for, you know, all types of siting.
One of the things we did notice in places where it had badly flooded, those culverts were full. They were just full. And we were certainly letting the town manager know, have the town crew go and check. The town crew was tremendous. They stopped by, they talked with the students, they talked with us. They were pleased with what the students were doing. It's a start, but we're not going to have Dartmouth students every year, you know, and if you want to keep your taxes low, we need to take some responsibility as property owners and residents of the town and start checking our ditches, make sure we don't throw things in them.
And basically it's allowing them to get preemptively ahead of which ones might really cause a problem with the next flooding. I'm sure a lot of folks locally know this, but when they're clogged or when they're breaking down, that can mean that you flood right nearby somebody's their basement, their foundation of their house, or something else that's important around where they are. And culverts breaking down can eventually lead to roads breaking or bridges breaking. A lot of the culverts are the first kind of breakdown of infrastructure and flooding that can affect bigger infrastructure. So that's why they're so important. And unfortunately, we often don't see them until they're a problem. And so really just getting out there with the students and community members has been, I think it's been really inspiring for the students. That's what I hear about. They like being out in the community. They like meeting people. They like walking the roads of these Vermont towns. And they're really learning about the complications that people are facing related to flooding. And what are the trade-offs? You know, what are we going to repair? What might we need to relocate? Talking about floodplains, talking about the need to revitalize floodplains. So students get to learn all of that in practice as they walk through the towns and help monitor the culverts. So as social scientists, we learn more about the social aspects of these environmental issues. We think it's a great education for our students, and we're so happy that it's actually hopefully useful to the towns and community partners.
Although we've started this in Cavendish, the next steps are to engage the wider community into the process of understanding where your culverts are, where your ditches are on your property and in your neighborhood, and either doing some light maintenance yourself or documenting where you think we might need to have some maintenance done, where to report that, and who to ask for some help if you can't do it yourself. Beyond Cavendish, we want to head into other communities. The Dartmouth College kids are working up in the White River on this as well. So we're looking at getting regional and statewide. So it's a very exciting time to be looking at this. So yay, Culvert Crawlers.
There's some people that really can't go out and do this work. We can help them, and we will do that. But we can't just guess where it is. It helps if we know. Our students really did a terrific job, and we did a lot of the culverts in town. So we know where issues are that they couldn't do, but the town crew could then follow up on.
Dr. Sarah Kelly and I are both really committed to community-based participatory research, and it's something that we've both done in other settings. And so we're aware of the ways that funding and resources are sometimes not abundant in small communities, in rural communities. And so we applied for a few grants that would help support the development of this Culvert Crawlers work in the broader context of our interest in understanding those gaps in communication better. So the research side of it is like this long-term project about flood mapping, mitigation, recovery, and community organizing around mutual aid response. And so we're starting to think of this Culvert Crawlers work as kind of intimate infrastructure. So whereas we have the big FEMA maps that we're looking at, like where are the gaps in communication around those, and then we have this small scale work with culverts and drains and ditches that is really what causes the flooding, right, on this end. So sort of connecting these big questions across scales through the resources that we have as faculty and research associates at Dartmouth College, and through our students in the classes that we've been teaching for the last 3 terms, who really come through with volunteering and putting effort into figuring out what kind of tools does the community need.
For this project in the Black River Valley, what we're really hoping to do with our community partners is that this project gets taken over by the community. So success would look like that this is still being used by local folks to monitor their culverts, drains, and ditches, and it's informing resilience locally. It's informing the towns feeling like they're more on top of the issues that's coming up with their infrastructure. And this type of community science could be built out to include the water quality samples that they're already taking as part of Black River Action Team, or other things folks want to monitor in relation to erosion, for example.
We see our students able to directly support work that needs to be done, but that everyone, town managers and public works folks know they don't have the time and the resources to do as fast as it maybe needs to be done. So we really appreciate all the public works folks bringing us in and teaching us about how they do what they do and what they need, and pointing us in the direction of particular roads and particular needs. And this is also a place where the community can get involved. So we ideally don't want to just have it be that there's always going to be students coming to monitor drains and ditches. We want this to be a community education project, which will then sort of turn over to the community and say, okay, now there are 20 culvert crawlers in each town who monitor drains and ditches, for instance. People feel empowered to give information to the town about the culverts, drains, and ditches that are near them, so that the town can understand better what's happening with water in their towns.
I'm a geographer. I think about this with maps, but I think we need to be able to visualize what's happening with our changing communities and with these flooding issues to kind of make more informed decisions. So hopefully long-term, this project is part of that for Cavendish, Ludlow, and local towns.
There are things everybody can do to help, because we know we're going to get hit again, unfortunately. And we can be in a better place if we have good flowing ditches and culverts that work.
Climate science is showing us that we're having increasing rainfall, and in those precipitation events, more water is falling. So we see those trends happening, and we know that those increased rainfall in short amounts of time are going to continue to stress the infrastructure that we have that was built that wasn't for that level of rain, right? And so we need to take better stock of our infrastructure and think about and plan ahead for those bigger rainfall events in the future. So this project is part of building out local tools to do that. And those can be in conversation with regional efforts, statewide efforts, and federal efforts. And we need to do work at multiple scales in order to really change policy, change how we build infrastructure to make for more resilient futures and to support our communities being hit less hard in the future by these flooding events.
People can go and move wherever they want to move, but everybody has got some variation. They're dealing with it. And we have the structure and the bones that we can dig in and make this a much better, safer place for everybody. I mean, we've done all kinds of river planting this year, to help shore up banks, all of that. And the students have helped with that. They have been terrific.
So you might be wondering, why are a couple of social scientists who think about meaning and culture and relations and power, why are we talking about infrastructure? We spend a lot of time talking to people and learning about people's lived experience. And we call that ethnography. And that ethnographic attention to lived experience is one of the things that makes our work really rich and really informed by close to the ground stories that matter for long-term understanding of human communities. And the simple fact of the matter is, like, infrastructure is a human-created thing, right? Humans make infrastructure, therefore it is part of culture and cultural process and politics. But we also know that as social scientists, we're not the only ones who know things about people and infrastructure. So Dr. Kelly and I have worked to develop a really strong interdisciplinary team, because we know that in order to address these big questions about long-term flood or disaster mitigation, we need information from a lot of different sources. It can't just be one discipline that's addressing the questions and going to come up with a magical right answer. It has to be all of us.
So our next steps are really to engage the community in doing this kind of work, so the average person knows what the drainage looks like on their property, the culverts and the ditches, some basic tools for maintenance. Don't throw your Christmas tree and your yard waste in there. Don't blow your leaves in there. Keep your ditches and culverts clean, and we're working on guidance for that, but also where to report problems that you think you might see on some of these culverts, and then expanding that into other communities and around the state and around the region.